So here we're going to talk about cedar apple rust. And cedar apple rust is an interesting disease that alternates between cedar or eastern red cedar, juniperus species, and members of the apple genus Malus. And so this is a fungal disease caused by Gymnosporangium. Well, there's actually multiple species of Gymnosporangium, so we don't necessarily need to go into the specific species because there's actually different ones that will alternate. But it's Gymnosporangium is the genus, and so their biology is really quite interesting. They have this life cycle where they produce spores in the spring on eastern red cedar or southern red cedar, Juniperus virginiana or Juniperus silicicola, and they produce spores on those Juniperus and on these little galls. And here's sort of dried specimens of these galls. Usually in early spring or late spring, depending on where you're at, these will then enlarge to produce these large. They look like a large gelatinous mass. And here you can see one starting to enlarge here, but they get bigger. These are called telia. And these very large telia, are orange, and they look like big horns. And these spores from here are windborne, and they go and they infect various Malus species, apples, crab apples, different members of the Malus genus. And then later on, there's a different spore type that's produced on those Malus species that then can reinfect the junipers again. And so the impact on the juniperus or on the cedars is limited. There's really not a major impact on them. It doesn't impact them in any major way typically, but there can be a major impact on apples, especially if you're a commercial apple producer. The effect can be major. It can reduce a photosynthetic area of the leaves. It can reduce production, and you can have major impact. So there's been a lot of concern about management of this disease to reduce the impact to apple growers. And there's been in certain areas they've tried to eradicate the cedars in those areas, and there's lots of other ways this is managed through resistance in the apples and using fungicides and things like that. Now, there are other members of this genus that have similar biology. Instead of going to Malus, they go to other members of the rose family, and some of those are common here in this area in Florida, for example. And we have some. These are old specimens, but they will alternate to things like hawthorn, for example. And so we have a couple different species that alternate to hawthorn. So hawthorns are in the rose family. They're related to apples, but so they're similar. But instead of infecting the leaves, they actually infect the fruits, for example, of hawthorn. So here you can see the spores being produced on the fruits of hawthorn. And when they infect the juniper, they actually infect the stem tissue of the juniper. So that's another just closely related species, and so there's a bunch of these that have and we broadly refer to these as cedar apple rusts, or but there's others like I said, hawthorn rust, and they're all kind of related. So to identify these, you really need to see. It's really the fungus that you're looking for, because the fungus is either going to produce the spores on the Malus or the Crataegus, depending on which host you're looking at, or you're going to see these galls, or when they're really enlarged, the telia, the spores, or on the juniper, or if you're looking at the hawthorn rust, you might see enlarged stems that actually have orange spores being produced on them in spring as well. So that's the primary identification features for this disease, and something you would look for in our region. So this is cedar apple rust.